Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. On the Republican side, meantime, President Trump is stepping up his attacks on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who he clearly sees as his primary rival for the 2024 presidential nomination of the GOP. And late last week, the Trump campaign put out a statement that it calls the real Ron DeSantis playbook. It includes a quote from a Trump spokesman saying, "The real DeSantis record is one of misery and despair. He has left a wake of destruction all across Florida." And Colin, what is a little bit amusing about that is Ron DeSantis was just reelected by the people of Florida pretty resoundingly with 59.5% of the vote.
Yeah, he was reelected. And by the way, that misery and despair that Donald Trump is talking about is misery and despair that he has apparently chosen for himself since he spends much of his time in Florida, right? So I'd be interested to know, as a Florida resident, I wonder who Mr. Trump voted for governor. All of this sort of bluster that you're getting from Trump is obviously sort of his particular brand of short-sightedness, which is that he thinks that all voters respond on this extremely shallow level, that if he can create nicknames and make this all about personality and sort of name call, that always rebounds to his advantage. I think in the case of Ron DeSantis, though, you do have a situation now where there's enough attention to him on the national stage and to his accomplishments on some pretty core issues that Republican voters care about. You know, from my perspective, Kyle, the biggest plus is probably that Florida has done very well with school choice. They have expanded school choice, and they passed a bill in March that would make the program universal so that any family can be part of it. That's very popular with Republican voters across the board. And people already know what Ron DeSantis is about. So I think Donald Trump is going to have a harder time with that sale.
The other thing, Kim, that jumped out to me about this statement from Trump is it's a list of things that Florida is allegedly the worst state at or ranked 42nd in this. And you have to click through the links to figure out what sources he's talking about. But I'll just take a couple of examples. So Trump cites a report last year from Oxfam that says Florida is the 29th best state for workers. But according to the rubric that Oxfam uses, states lose points if they have a right to work law, and they lose points if they don't allow cities and counties to set their own minimum wage laws. Another one is there's a couple points where Trump is citing research from the Florida Policy Institute. This is a pretty progressive group as far as I can tell. It opposes Florida school choice programs. It has called for a law to give illegal immigrants driver's licenses, which is the kind of thing that normally you would think Trump would be dead set against. And so I think this is a fascinating statement because, Kim, it almost seems like President Trump is reaching for the kinds of attacks on Florida and Ron DeSantis that you would expect from President Biden. And yet these are guys running against each other in the Republican primary.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit last week with regard to Trump's decision to side with Disney over DeSantis. When DeSantis came out, criticized Disney, said he was going to come back around again with another bill to try to rein in that company, given its quote, woke agenda. Trump came out, lambasted him, which weirdly put him on the side of a company that has been very critical of Ron DeSantis's parental rights bill in Florida, something that was very popular with a lot of Florida voters, whether on the right or in the middle, and some even on the left. And so here we go again. And again, just an amazing dynamic. Trump, in his desire to hit on DeSantis, is not quite sure where to go, and so ends up siding with all of these progressive groups, or just progressive talking points. You know, another one that was in there is there were a number of statistics taken from the website Wallet Hub, and that organization says that Florida is 26th on its list of states for working moms. But then you look at what it's based on and the metrics. One of them is, for instance, gender representation gap in different economic sectors. Well, that is not something that most conservative voters consider a valid way of measuring whether or not a state is good or not good for working in. And the things that have mattered, lower taxes, more school choice, various things that the Florida legislature has done to help parents, to reduce regulations, those are the reason people have been moving to Florida in droves. So it's very curious that Donald Trump has gone here. We've all known for a long time he's not a big policy guy. I don't know who put this together for him. And I don't even know if the guy would be prepared if he were hit with this in a debate to be able to really justify or back up some of this. But in the short term, he seems to have decided that who cares what side he lands on as long as he's beating up on DeSantis. And I think this is maybe a dynamic that you're going to see more going forward. And I wonder if it isn't going to put him sideways a little bit with some of his voters.
But so far, it does seem to be a one-way war. DeSantis several times has deflected questions about Trump's attacks or his poll position vis-a-vis Trump. And this week he was on a trip to Japan and was asked about it again. And looking more than a little bit irked, this is what he said.
Governor, polls show you falling behind Trump. Any thoughts on that?
I'm not a candidate, so we'll see if and when that changes.
Colin, what do you make of this? Is it wise for Ron DeSantis to not take on these attacks? And Colin will give you the last word.
Yeah, I think it's funny, Kyle, right? It's a bit of an odd reversal what you see with DeSantis now, because it almost seems like DeSantis is behaving more like an incumbent would, a bit more reticent to sort of take on, the charges from the peanut gallery. And Trump, who's supposed to be presenting himself as an incumbent, is acting as his usual self as the peanut gallery. But, again, I think some of the numbers out of Florida are things that Trump is going to have a hard time shooting down, and not least of all the fact that Florida registered as number 2 most fun state. Surely that's going to be a hard one to sell people against. And I can say, being from Chicago, where a lot of people are leaving the state of Illinois, seeing a state like Florida where everyone is flocking in droves is also a bit of a tough sell for Mr. Trump.
Thank you, Colin and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.